The scent of betrayal is sharper than any perfume. Isabella, 7 months pregnant and blissfully envisioning her family's future, stumbled upon a truth more devastating than any nightmare. Her husband, Adrian, the man who vowed eternal love, had just purchased a lavish penthouse. Not for them, but for his mistress. But Adrian underestimated the fury of a woman scorned and the fierce protectiveness of a mother-to-be. This isn't just a story of infidelity. It's a masterclass in revenge, a breathtaking heist of a multi-million-dollar property, and a pregnant wife who decided to rewrite her destiny one forged legal document at a time. The city skyline, a glittering tapestry of ambition and dreams, stretched out before Isabella Rossi. But her gaze was fixed on the tiny knitted booties in her hands. Pale yellow, soft as a whisper, they were a tangible symbol of the new life stirring within her. At 32, Isabella had what many considered the perfect life, married to Adrian Thorne. A charismatic and devastatingly successful property developer, she lived in a sprawling duplex overlooking Central Park, a testament to his Midas touch in the cutthroat world of New York real estate. Theirs was a world of charity galas, exclusive dinner parties, and whispered admiration. Adrian, with his sharp suit's disarming smile and a mind that could dissect a complex deal in minutes, was the golden boy of the Thorne Empire, a dynasty built on steel glass and shrewd negotiations. Isabella, an art curator with a keen eye and a gentle demeanor, was often described as his elegant counterpoint, the calm in his whirlwind existence. They had met at a Sotheby's auction, him bidding aggressively on a modern sculpture, her quietly observing his passion. Their courtship had been swift, a dazzling romance that culminated in a wedding featured in Vogue. For 5 years, their marriage had been a carefully curated masterpiece, also Isabella believed. The pregnancy, their first, had been a joyous surprise. Adrian had been ecstatic, or at least he'd performed ecstasy convincingly. He'd showered her with affection, insisted on hiring a renowned obstetrician, and had even started designing a nursery in their duplex, a room with panoramic city views, promising their child the world. "Only the best for my heir," he'd chuckled, kissing her soundly, the scent of his expensive Tom Ford cologne, momentarily intoxicating her. But lately a subtle dissonance had begun to creep into their perfect symphony. Adrian was working later, his excuses more elaborate. "The Singapore deal is hitting a snag," he'd say, his voice tight with a stress she hadn't heard in years. Or "dinner with potential investors, darling. Don't wait up." The bouquets of lilies, her favorite, still arrived every Monday, but the accompanying notes felt perfunctory. The shared laughter over breakfast grew less frequent, replaced by the rustle of Adrian's Wall Street Journal and his clipped responses. Isabella, hormonal and increasingly sensitive, initially dismissed her unease as pregnancy-induced anxiety. Her friends, mostly wives of Adrian's business associates, chirped about how lucky she was. "Adrian adores you, Izzy, and a baby. You have it all." But a small, cold knot of dread began to tighten in her stomach. It started with a phone call she'd accidentally picked up. Adrian had left his phone on the bedside table, a rare oversight. The caller ID read, KZ Interiors. Curious, as they hadn't commissioned any new design work for their home or his office recently, she answered. "Mr. Thorne, just confirming the fabric swatches for the Hudson Yards penthouse arrived. Chloe is particularly thrilled with the velvet," a bright, slightly too familiar female voice had said. Isabella's blood ran cold. Hudson Yards. Chloe, she'd mumbled a wrong number, and hung up her heart, hammering against her ribs. Adrian didn't own a penthouse at Hudson Yards. Their portfolio was extensive, but she knew every property, every investment. Or so she thought. When she'd cautiously questioned him later that evening, feigning casual interest about new acquisitions, Adrian had been dismissive. Hudson Yards? No, darling. We're focusing on the overseas markets right now. You must have misheard. He'd smiled a little too quickly, a little too smoothly, and changed the subject to the upcoming baby shower. The seed of doubt once planted began to sprout its tendrils, wrapping around her peace of mind. She started noticing other things, the faint, unfamiliar scent of jasmine on his shirts. A perfume definitely not hers. The way he angled his phone away from her when texts came in. The sudden increase in boys' nights out that stretched into the early hours of the morning. One Tuesday afternoon, while searching for a misplaced baby book in Adrian's study, a room usually as meticulously organized as his business dealings, she found a platinum American Express statement tucked inside a golf magazine. It wasn't his primary card, the one linked to their joint finances. This was a separate account, one she hadn't known existed. Her hands trembled as she scanned the itemized list. There were charges from high-end boutiques she didn't frequent. Agent provocateur Graf. Extravagant dinners at Daniel, a 2-Michelin-starred restaurant they hadn't visited together in over a year. And then the entry that made her breath catch, a significant down payment, hundreds of thousands of dollars, to related companies, the developers behind the ultra-luxurious residences at Hudson Yards. Specifically, a property listed simply as Penthouse B35, Hudson Yards. The booties in her lap suddenly felt like lead weights. The nursery Adrian was supposedly designing felt like a gilded cage. The life she believed was perfect was in reality a meticulously crafted lie, and she was standing on the precipice of its shattering. The man she loved, the father of her unborn child, was not just distant. He was leading a double life funded by their shared prosperity, and the centerpiece of this deception was a multi-million-dollar penthouse, a love nest for him and a woman named Chloe. The revelation didn't break her, not immediately. Instead, a chilling calm descended. The gentle art curator began to recede, and in her place a woman Isabella hadn't known existed, started to emerge one, with eyes as hard as the diamonds Adrian had likely bought for his mistress. Her baby deserved more than a broken home and a distracted father. Her baby deserved security, and Isabella would ensure they got it one way or another. The game, she realized, had just begun, and Adrian Thorne had no idea who he was truly playing against. The platinum Amex statement felt like a venomous snake in Isabella's hand, its cold corporate lettering a stark contrast to the storm brewing within her. Hudson Yards, Penthouse B, Chloe. The names and places swirled in her mind, a toxic cocktail of betrayal. For days, Isabella moved through her luxurious life like an automaton, the perfect smile plastered on her face, her voice even and calm, while inside a tempest raged. She attended her prenatal yoga classes, discussed nursery color palettes with an overly enthusiastic designer Adrian had hired, a feeble attempt at misdirection, she now realized, and played the role of the serene, expectant mother. But beneath the surface, Isabella was a woman transformed. The soft edges of her personality were sharpening, her grief slowly, methodically being channeled into a steely resolve. She needed more than suspicion. She needed irrefutable proof, a complete picture of Adrian's duplicity. Her first step was discreet leveraging the skills she'd honed as an art curator. An eye for detail, meticulous research, and an understanding of the value of discretion. She started with KZ Interiors. A quick online search revealed it was a boutique interior design firm known for its opulent, modern aesthetic, often featured in architectural digests. Their portfolio showcased several high-end residential projects, including, to her chilling confirmation, previous collaborations with related companies at Hudson Yards. The Chloe, mentioned by the caller, was likely the principal designer, Katarina Zaleski, or perhaps more ominously, the client herself. Isabella then turned her attention to Adrian's digital footprint. She knew his laptop password, their wedding anniversary, a tragically ironic choice now. One evening when Adrian claimed to be at a late dinner meeting, the kind that drags on forever, darling all about zoning permits and tedious legalities, she slipped into his study. The room, usually a sanctuary of order, felt tainted to the scent of his expensive cologne, now cloying. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, her heart pounding a nervous rhythm against her ribs. She navigated through his emails, her search terms precise: Hudson Yards, Penthouse B, Chloe, KZ Interiors. The results were a digital tapestry of his deceit. Emails exchanged with a private banker confirming fund transfers. Invoices from KZ Interiors addressed to Mr. A. Thorne, Penthouse B35, Hudson Yards. And then the photographs, attached to an email from Katarina Zaleski with the subject line, Mood Board and Initial Concepts, PHB, were images that made Isabella's breath hitch. They weren't just architectural renderings. There were photos of a woman strikingly beautiful with cascading raven hair, a predatory smile, and eyes that seemed to challenge the world. She was posing provocatively in various nearly completed rooms of the penthouse, a sprawling living area with floor-to-ceiling windows offering breathtaking views of the Hudson River, a master bedroom that exuded sensual luxury, a bathroom clad in Italian marble. This was Chloe, and she was clearly making herself at home. One photo in particular twisted the knife deeper. Chloe, draped in a silk robe that Isabella recognized as one of Adrian's, was laughing, holding a champagne flute with Adrian's arm unmistakably around her waist. His face out of shot, but his distinctive Patek Philippe watch gleaming on his wrist. The watch Isabella had gifted him for their 3rd anniversary. The air in the study grew heavy, suffocating. Isabella closed the laptop, a cold fury replacing the initial shock. This wasn't just a fleeting affair. This was a parallel life, a carefully constructed world built on lies and their shared fortune. The penthouse wasn't just a property, it was a monument to his betrayal. To make the wound even more personal, one of the documents detailed the purchase of specific art pieces for the penthouse, pieces from a gallery Isabella had championed artists whose careers she had helped nurture. He was using her world, her passions, to furnish his love nest. The next day, Isabella knew she had to see it for herself. She needed to stand in that space to feel the reality of it. Under the pretext of visiting a friend who supposedly lived in the Hudson Yards complex, she took a taxi to the shimmering, newly minted neighborhood on Manhattan's West Side. 35. Hudson Yards loomed before her, a beacon of modern luxury, its sleek glass facade reflecting the gray, indifferent sky. Her hands were clammy as she approached the concierge desk in the opulent, art-filled lobby. She'd concocted a story about delivering a gift for Chloe Miller in Penthouse B, hoping the generic surname wouldn't raise suspicion. "I'm sorry, ma'am," the impeccably dressed concierge said, his voice polite but firm. "We don't have a Chloe Miller listed in Penthouse B. That residence is under the name Thorne." Thorne. He hadn't even bothered to hide it under an LLC or a trust, at least not initially for the concierge's internal records. Or perhaps he had, and this was just the occupant name. The sheer audacity of it, the blatant disrespect, sent a fresh wave of cold anger through her. "Oh," Isabella feigned confusion, pressing a hand to her pregnant belly. "Perhaps it's under Adrian Thorne. I'm his associate. He asked me to drop off some documents for a Miss Chloe who is staying there." She forced a warm smile. The concierge, perhaps softened by her visible pregnancy or the mention of Adrian's name, a name that undoubtedly carried weight in such establishments, seemed to relent slightly. "I can't grant you access to the residence, ma'am, but I can certainly let Miss Chloe know you're here if she's in." Isabella's mind raced. She didn't want to confront Chloe, not yet. Not like this. "Actually, you know what, I think I have her direct number. I'll just coordinate with her. So sorry to bother you." She retreated, her composure intact, until she was safely back in the taxi. Then the tears she had been holding back finally fell hot and bitter. He owned it. He was flaunting it. And Chloe was living in it, a queen in a castle built with the spoils of Isabella's crumbling marriage. The real-world sting of it all was a detail Adrian had carelessly flaunted in his communications with the interior designer. He had specifically requested the installation of a Bang & Olufsen Biosound shape wall speaker system throughout the penthouse, a feature he knew Isabella had admired for their own home, something they had discussed for their planned country retreat. He had even forwarded an email chain where he'd negotiated the price, boasting to Katerina Zaleski about securing a significant discount due to volume. The volume, Isabella now understood, included his legitimate properties and this monument to his infidelity. That evening, when Adrian returned home, whistling softly as he loosened his tie, Isabella watched him with new eyes. Every smile, every casual touch, every inquiry about her day felt like a meticulously crafted performance. He asked about her doctor's appointment, feigned concern about her slight fatigue, and even rubbed her swollen ankles, his touch now feeling like a viper's caress. "You seem quiet tonight, Izzy," he murmured, his voice laced with a concern that now sounded utterly false. "Everything okay with the little one?" Isabella looked at him, at the handsome face she had loved, the face that was now a mask. She placed a hand on her belly. "Yes, Adrian," she said, her voice surprisingly steady. "The baby is strong, very strong." And so was she. The unveiling was complete. The next act was hers to write. The discovery of the Hudson Yards penthouse and the blatant evidence of Adrian's affair, he didn't send Isabella into a spiral of public hysterics or tearful confrontations. Instead, a glacial calm settled over her. The pain was a deep, throbbing wound, but it was now intertwined with a burgeoning, cold fury. This wasn't just about a broken heart. It was about survival for herself and her unborn child. Adrian had grievously underestimated her. He saw her as the gentle, art-loving wife, a beautiful ornament to his successful life. He had forgotten the sharp intellect that had made her a respected curator, the quiet resilience that lay beneath her composed exterior. For a week, Isabella lived a bizarre double life. By day, she was the picture of maternal bliss, attending baby-related appointments, thanking friends for their thoughtful gifts at her lavish baby shower, an event that now felt like a grotesque mockery, and enduring Adrian's increasingly saccharine displays of affection. He was laying it on thick, perhaps sensing a subtle shift in her, or maybe just assuaging his own guilt. But by night, when Adrian was supposedly at late meetings or had fallen into a deep sleep beside her, a proximity that now made her skin crawl. Isabella was wide awake, her mind a whirlwind of strategy. Her first crucial step was to seek legal counsel. She couldn't rely on the Thorne family lawyers. Their loyalty would undoubtedly lie with Adrian and his formidable father, Adrian Thorne, the patriarch of the dynasty. She needed someone independent, someone brilliant, and someone utterly ruthless. Through a discreet inquiry via an old university friend who now worked in a rival law firm, she found Victoria Chen, a renowned divorce attorney, known as the Shark in Manhattan's elite circles. Victoria had a reputation for dismantling powerful men and securing astonishing settlements for her clients. Their first meeting took place in a nondescript office in a less ostentatious part of Midtown, far from the Thorne family's usual haunts. Isabella, dressed in understated elegance, laid out her story with calm precision, presenting copies of the Amex statement, the emails, and the damning photographs. She even detailed the Bang & Olufsen sound system, a small but telling detail of Adrian's calculated cruelty. Victoria Chen, a woman with sharp, intelligent eyes and an air of unshakable confidence, listened intently, her expression unreadable. When Isabella finished, Victoria leaned back in her chair. "Mrs. Thorne," Victoria began, her voice crisp and direct. "Your husband is not just an adulterer. He's arrogant. The fact that the Penthouse is for now in his name, or a very easily traceable entity, simplifies certain aspects and complicates others, especially if he funded it with what could be argued as marital assets." "So what are my options?" Isabella asked, her voice steady. "I don't just want a divorce, Miss Chen. I want to ensure my child's future is secure. He used our money, our life, to build this other existence." The word "our" felt like ash in her mouth. Victoria nodded. "Standard procedure would be to file for divorce, citing adultery. We would then enter into discovery, identify all marital assets, including the Penthouse, and fight for your rightful share. Given your pregnancy and the blatant nature of his infidelity, we could aim for a very favorable settlement. However," Victoria paused, a glint in her eye. "You mentioned something that piqued my interest. You found the original Amex statement. Do you have access to his study, his files, his financial documents on a regular basis?" "Yes," Isabella confirmed. "He's become careless, or perhaps he simply doesn't believe I'd ever look." "And this Penthouse," Victoria continued, "was it purchased outright, or is there a mortgage?" Isabella recalled the documents. "A substantial down payment, but there was mention of financing for the remainder through a private bank he often uses, Sterling Fiduciary Trust." Victoria tapped a perfectly manicured nail on her desk. "If the property is solely in his name, or in a single-member LLC, where he is the sole member, and if he used a power of attorney for any part of the transaction that you might hypothetically have access to, or could replicate with compelling accuracy, or if he was foolish enough to leave signed blank transfer documents anywhere." She let the sentence hang, a silent invitation. Isabella's mind raced. Adrian was an organized man, but he was also a creature of habit, and increasingly of arrogance. He often had documents couriered to their home for signature, sometimes leaving them on his desk overnight if he was too busy or distracted. He trusted their housekeeper implicitly, and Isabella well, she was just his pregnant, unsuspecting wife. He sometimes has his personal assistant, a very efficient young man named Martin. "Prepare documents," Isabella said slowly, a daring idea beginning to form. "Martin is incredibly loyal to Adrian, but also somewhat overwhelmed." Adrian signed stacks of papers, often without more than a cursory glance. especially if Martin assures him it's standard procedure or time-sensitive closing docs. A ghost of a smile played on Victoria Chen's lips. Interesting. Now, directly transferring a deed without his knowledge is highly illegal and fraught with peril. Forgery fraud. These are serious crimes, Mrs. Thorne. We are not going down that path. Isabella's fleeting hope deflated slightly. However, Victoria continued, leaning forward, understanding the structure of his holdings is key. If he has a dedicated LLC for the Penthouse, and if hypothetically you were also a member of that LLC, or could be made a member legitimately through some pre-existing general operating agreement clause, he's forgotten about. Or more simply, if the property is in his name and he, in a moment of, let's call it, misguided affection, or perhaps strategic asset protection from other creditors, decided to add you to the title as a joint tenant with rights of survivorship, or to transfer it into a trust of which you are the primary beneficiary, that would be a different story. Victoria then outlined a complex, audacious strategy. It wasn't about forging a signature on a deed transfer. It was about exploiting Adrian's predictable patterns, his arrogance, and the complex web of his financial dealings. It would involve impeccable timing, a deep dive into his company's structures, and a certain degree of nerve that Isabella was surprised to find she possessed. The first step, Victoria instructed, is information. I need every detail you can find about the ownership structure of that penthouse. Is it Adrian Thorne, or AT Holdings, LLC, or something similar? I need to know about his typical document signing habits. Does Martin use a specific notary? Are there digital security measures you're aware of for his financial dealings? We need to understand his system. Over the next few weeks, Isabella became a corporate spy in her own home. She meticulously observed Adrian's routines. She noted that Martin Poole, his assistant, indeed prepared large folders of documents for Adrian's signature every few days. Adrian would often bring these folders home, intending to review them, but usually just scrawling his signature on the designated lines while multitasking on a call or watching financial news. She learned that Adrian used a particular notary, an elderly gentleman named Arthur Pinter, who was often on call for Thorne family dealings and was known to be somewhat lax, especially if the paperwork was presented by Martin, whom he trusted. The key Victoria had emphasized was not to forge, but to facilitate. To create a situation where Adrian himself unknowingly but willingly signed the necessary documents. This would involve preparing a legitimate-looking set of papers, perhaps an amendment to an existing trust or a transfer of an asset between his own entities that just happened to include the penthouse, with Isabella being added as a beneficiary or co-owner in a way that seemed innocuous or even beneficial for his asset protection. Isabella discovered that Adrian had indeed set up a new LLC for the Penthouse, Hudson Luxury Properties LLC. He was the sole member. This was both a challenge and an opportunity. Victoria Chen began to draft a series of documents. They were complex, layered, and designed to be slipped into a stack of Adrian's usual paperwork. The crucial document would be a transfer of ownership of Hudson Luxury Properties LLC to a newly created trust, a trust where Isabella would be named as the primary, irrevocable beneficiary, and crucially, as the trustee with the power to manage its assets. The trick, Mrs. Thorne, Victoria said, during one of their clandestine meetings, her voice low and serious, is the presentation. It needs to be buried. It needs to look like a standard, boring internal restructuring document, something his eyes would glaze over. Martin Poole, his assistant, is the gatekeeper. If Martin includes it in the pile, Adrian will likely sign. Isabella felt a shiver of trepidation, but it was overshadowed by a fierce determination. "How do I get it into Martin's pile?" Victoria smiled. "That Mrs. Thorne is where your understanding of your husband's office dynamics and perhaps a little social engineering will come into play. Martin is overworked. What if a few urgent, complex-looking but ultimately unimportant documents were to land on his desk from another department, just as he's compiling Mr. Thorne's signing stack, making him rushed and less likely to scrutinize every single page he adds from his own pile?" Isabella's mind began to whirl. She knew Adrian often complained about the inefficiencies of their London office, how they'd send documents at the last minute. She also knew Martin was trying to impress Adrian to secure a promotion. The strategist was fully awake. She had the legal mastermind in Victoria Chen. She had the intimate knowledge of her husband's vulnerabilities. And she had the most powerful motivator of all the tiny life growing inside her, a life she would protect with the ferocity of a lioness. The stage was being set for a high-stakes performance, and Isabella was ready to play her part. The penthouse, a symbol of his betrayal, would become her leverage, her security, and ultimately her triumph. The plan was audacious, a high-wire act of legal cunning and psychological warfare fraught with 1,000 points of failure. Yet for Isabella, the risk felt negligible compared to the certainty of a life tethered to Adrian's deceit. She had crossed her Rubicon the moment she saw Chloe's smug, proprietary smile in those penthouse photographs. The sight of the Bang & Olufsen speakers, a shared dream he had stolen and gifted to his mistress, was an intimate cruelty that had cauterized her pain, leaving behind a diamond-hard resolve. This was no longer about a broken heart. It was a reclamation. Victoria Chen, a maestro of marital combat, had drafted the documents with the precision of a watchmaker. They were a symphony of legalese designed to be impenetrable and, most importantly, profoundly boring. The centerpiece was a deed of gift, an instrument that would transfer the complete ownership of Hudson Luxury Properties LLC, the single-member entity whose sole asset was the penthouse, into a newly established entity, the Isabella M. Thorne Irrevocable Trust. Isabella was named as the sole trustee and primary beneficiary. To any cursory glance, the sheaf of papers looked like just another dry internal asset protection strategy, a typical piece of financial restructuring common within the labyrinthine Thorne family holdings. The entire strategy hinged on a single fallible human element. Martin Poole, Adrian's ambitious but perpetually harried executive assistant. Isabella had observed him for weeks. Martin was competent and fiercely loyal, but he was also drowning in the deluge of Adrian's demands, desperate for a promotion, and terrified of appearing anything less than perfectly in control. He was, as Victoria had astutely guessed, susceptible to precisely engineered chaos. Isabella's campaign began with a digital whisper. Using a burner phone and a public Wi-Fi network, she began her subtle manipulation. She carefully crafted an anonymous tip to a notorious financial gossip columnist whose online persona was Sloane Street Spectator, a must-read for Manhattan's financial elite. The tip hinted at a major internal restructuring within the Thorne empire, alluding to a game-changing international acquisition that was being kept under wraps. The resulting column, published 2 days later, sent a ripple of speculation through the market, and more importantly, through the halls of Thorne Industries. The buzz put immense pressure on the entire executive suite to be even more efficient and discreet, a pressure that flowed downhill and pooled directly onto Martin Poole's desk. Next came the London distraction. Isabella knew Adrian was impatiently awaiting a hefty document package from their London office concerning a stalled Canary Wharf development project. From a computer in a public library in Queens, she composed a carefully worded email. Posing as a disgruntled junior compliance officer, she sent an anonymous message directly to Martin. It warned that the long-delayed London package was finally en route, but was a complete organizational disaster, and would require urgent collation and immediate signature by Mr. Thorne to meet a non-negotiable regulatory deadline. As a final touch, she attached a few deliberately confusing but ultimately harmless sample pages, a corrupted PDF, and a password-protected spreadsheet to lend her story credence. As predicted, when the real and merely slightly disorganized London package arrived on a Thursday afternoon, Adrian's preferred day for signing bulk documents, Martin was already primed for panic. This was Isabella's window. Earlier that day, she had taken a taxi to a high-end specialty print shop in the financial district, a place known for its discretion and ability to flawlessly replicate corporate document styles. She felt a tremor in her hands as she handed over the file Victoria had prepared. She specified the precise weight and texture of the paper stock, the exact shade of ivory that Thorne Industries used, ensuring the final product was indistinguishable from their standard internal paperwork. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she prepared for the final crucial step. Adrian had a 2-hour dental appointment for a crown fitting that afternoon, an appointment he'd been complaining about for days. She knew he would return to the office in a foul mood, impatient and eager to slash his signature across his paperwork and be done with the day. She also knew that Martin, when juggling multiple crises, often left Adrian's prepped signature binder on the broad credenza in the outer office. Dressed in an elegant maternity dress, her swollen belly a perfect disguise of maternal vulnerability, she arrived on the 48th floor. She was carrying a single file, a small, unimportant report she had deliberately hidden from Adrian a few days prior. Under the guise of dropping off this forgotten document, she approached Martin's desk. She greeted him with a warm, conspiratorial smile. "Martin, you look absolutely swamped. Adrian mentioned he was expecting a mountain of things to sign today." "Mrs. Thorne." "Yes, it's one of those days," he stammered, running a hand through his already disheveled hair, his eyes darting between 2 ringing phone lines. "The London docks are a complete nightmare, and there's a new compliance stack that just came in from legal." "You poor thing," Isabella cooed, her voice dripping with sympathy. "Don't let Adrian bully you too much when he gets back from the dentist. He's always a bear after," she said lightly, placing her decoy file on his already buried desk. As she spoke, her eyes scanned the room. There it was, the thick leather signature binder, sitting on the credenza as she'd hoped temporarily set aside as Martin wrestled with the new arrivals. A shrill ring from his direct line demanded his attention. As Martin turned, swiveling his chair to answer the call, Isabella's plan went into motion. With a sleight of hand that would have made a magician proud, her movements obscured by a large, ostentatious floral arrangement, she retrieved the slender folder containing Victoria's documents from her oversized handbag. In one fluid, breath-holding moment, she crossed to the credenza, opened the binder, and deftly slipped her folder into the middle of the thick stack of papers. It was done. She made her excuses and left her legs feeling like jelly as she rode the elevator down. The waiting that followed was a unique form of torment. Later that evening, Adrian came home irritable and exhausted, as predicted. He grumbled about the dentist, poured himself a large scotch and collapsed into his leather armchair. Isabella watched him with feigned indifference, flicking through an art magazine. Finally, he opened his briefcase and pulled out the signature binder. "God Poole is tryin' to bury me in paper," he muttered, taking a large gulp of his drink. Isabella held her breath, her own heart a frantic drum against the silence. He flipped through the pages, his pen, a dark blur, scrawling his familiar, arrogant signature on line after line. He barely glanced at the contents, his mind clearly elsewhere. Perhaps on Chloe, perhaps on his next deal. Then he reached the section containing Victoria's documents. Isabella's blood ran cold. He paused for a microsecond, his brow furrowing slightly at the title on the top of the page, Deed of Gift. Isabella braced herself, a wave of nausea rising in her throat. What in God's name is this structuring? He mumbled to himself, squinting at the page. He scanned the first few lines. Then, with a dismissive shrug, he seemed to reach a conclusion. Just more legal mumbo-jumbo from the finance department, likely a tax dodge his father's lawyers had cooked up. He signed, Adrian Thorne. The signature was bold, decisive, and utterly calamitously oblivious. He signed the trust agreement. He signed the LLC transfer. In 3 seconds of arrogant distraction, he signed away the multi-million-dollar penthouse. Isabella felt a dizzying, terrifying wave of triumph. She excused herself, claiming a sudden bout of fatigue, and retreated to their bedroom, her hands trembling uncontrollably. The next morning, as Adrian left for an early golf game, his preferred alibi for a rendezvous with Chloe Isabella, retrieved the binder from his study. She carefully extracted her precious ink-laden documents. She met a discreet courier Victoria had arranged, and the papers were whisked away to be notarized by a trusted associate of Victoria's, far from Adrian's usual channels, before being officially filed with the relevant city and state authorities. The paper trail was now legally binding and irreversible. The Hudson Yards penthouse now belonged to the Isabella M. Thorne Irrevocable Trust. The confrontation when it came a week later was more explosive than anything Isabella could have imagined. Adrian had apparently tried to access funds related to the Penthouse LLC, only to be blocked by a bureaucratic brick wall. He had instructed a frantic Martin Poole to investigate, and the truth had been unearthed. Isabella was in the nursery, calmly assembling a mobile of softly colored stars when he stormed in. He wasn't just angry. He was a spectacle of pure rage, his face a mask of thunderous disbelief. He was clutching a printout, his hand shaking violently. "What the hell is this, Isabella?" He roared, his voice echoing through their opulent duplex, a sound so guttural it seemed to shake the windows. "Hudson Luxury Properties LLC, transferred to some ridiculous trust with your name plastered all over it. My penthouse." Isabella turned slowly, her expression one of utter serenity. "Our penthouse, Adrian. I was under the impression it was your very special, very private project, the one with the lovely Chloe, the one with the Bang & Olufsen sound system I always wanted." Adrian's jaw dropped. The blood drained from his face, replaced by a mottled flush of shock and fury. You knew?" "Oh, I know everything, Adrian," Isabella said, her voice dangerously soft, each word a perfectly aimed dart. "I know about Chloe. I know about the dinners at Daniel you charged to a secret Amex. I know about the lingerie from Agent Provocateur and the diamonds from Graf. I know about the lies, the late nights, the pathetic excuses. I know about the betrayal of every vow you ever made to me and to the child I am carrying." "You conniving bitch," he spat, taking an aggressive step toward her. "You forged my signature. This is fraud. I'll have you arrested. I'll ruin you." Isabella didn't flinch. "No, Adrian, you won't," she said, her voice unwavering. "Because you didn't look closely enough, did you? In your haste. That was your signature. Quite clear, quite legal. You signed it all away yourself." She gestured to the printout he was still clutching. "As for ruining me, I think you'll find the tables have turned. That penthouse, your little love nest, is now the primary asset securing my future and our child's future. Go ahead, challenge it. Think of the scandal. Adrian Thorne, real estate mogul, defrauded by pregnant wife after affair exposed. Or my personal favorite, Thorne Empire, heir loses multi-million-dollar penthouse in shocking marital blunder. Your father will be thrilled." Adrian stared at her, utterly speechless, his rage battling with a dawning, horrifying understanding of the checkmate she had just delivered. He had been outmaneuvered, outplayed and annihilated by the woman he had dismissed as a beautiful fool. Just then her phone buzzed on a nearby table. It was a text from Victoria Chen. "Digital registries updated. Congratulations, Trustee Thorne. The asset is secured." Isabella allowed herself a small, cold, triumphant smile. "It seems Adrian," she said, turning her back on him and giving a star on the baby's mobile a gentle push. "That you bought a penthouse for your mistress, but your pregnant wife just changed the title. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a nursery to finish. For my child." The storm had broken, and Isabella was standing squarely in its eye, untouched, holding all the power. Adrian Thorne was not a man accustomed to defeat. He was a predator in the concrete jungle of New York real estate, a titan forged in a crucible of privilege and relentless ambition, used to bending rules, situations, and people to his will. The raw, undeniable fact that Isabella, his supposedly docile, decorative wife, had orchestrated such a devastatingly precise maneuver left him reeling in a chaotic vortex between incandescent rage and a chilling, almost dissociative sense of disbelief. His immediate reaction was a primal roar of bluster and threat, the only language he truly understood when cornered. "You won't get away with this, Isabella. My lawyers will tear this sham trust apart. They will eviscerate you. I'll drag you through every court in this state." He bellowed, his face a contorted mask of purple fury veins standing out on his neck. He advanced on her, his sheer physical presence meant to intimidate a tactic that had always worked before. But the woman before him was not the same one he had married. Isabella remained unnervingly calm, a serene island in the hurricane of his fury, which only fueled his rage further. "Your lawyers will find Adrian," she stated coolly, her voice cutting through his tirade like a shard of ice. "That the paperwork is impeccable. Your signature is authentic. The notarization is valid, the filing legitimate. They will also find that you, the sole member of Hudson Luxury Properties LLC, gifted its ownership into a trust for your wife and unborn child. How very noble. Perhaps you should have paid more attention to what you were signing, instead of rushing off to, well, you know." His threats of legal annihilation soon slammed into the formidable granite-like wall of Victoria Chen. When Adrian's high-powered legal team from a white shoe law firm, dispatched by a volcanically furious Alistair Thorne, attempted to contest the transfer, they found themselves in a battle they were wholly unprepared for. They entered Victoria's office with an air of condescending authority, expecting to intimidate her into a swift reversal. Instead, Victoria met them with a meticulously prepared defense, her demeanor exuding unshakable confidence. She didn't just counter their arguments. She dismantled them. She highlighted Adrian's undisputed signature, a fact their own handwriting experts were forced to confirm. She pointed to the clear, unambiguous language of the trust and transfer documents. Then, with surgical precision, she subtly hinted at the mountain of evidence she possessed regarding his adulterous affair and his clandestine diversion of marital assets. She spoke of flight manifests, credit card statements, detailing lavish gifts and damning photographs that would make for a spectacular media circus. The Thorne family lawyers, accustomed to steamrolling opponents with sheer financial might, found themselves in an uncharacteristically weak position. Victoria Chen painted a vivid picture of the discovery process for them. "Imagine, gentlemen," she said, her voice smooth as silk, "deposing my client, a heavily pregnant woman, forcing her to recount the details of her husband's infidelity on public record. Imagine the headlines, the optics," she continued, letting the word hang in the air, or to put it mildly catastrophic. The risk of a very public, very messy court battle. One that would drag the Thorne family name through the mud and expose Adrian's profound recklessness to business partners and rivals, was a powerful deterrent. The final nail in Adrian's coffin was hammered in by his own father. Alistair Thorne, a man who valued reputation and control above all else, summoned Adrian to his cavernous, wood-panelled office. He was reportedly apoplectic, his voice a low, dangerous growl. He wasn't angry about the affair that was a predictable male failing in his eyes, but about the sheer, unadulterated stupidity of being so comprehensively outmaneuvered by a woman he had always dismissed. "You didn't just get caught," Alistair seethed. "You signed the confession, gift-wrapped the evidence, and handed your enemy the gun. You have made the family look weak, and that is unforgivable." Meanwhile, Chloe, the mistress ensconced in her now formally gifted penthouse, had her own rude awakening. A formal, legally binding notice to vacate the premises, dispatched by Victoria Chen's office, arrived via courier. Chloe, who had envisioned herself as the future Mrs. Thorne, or at the very least the indefinite queen of her Hudson Yards castle, was incandescent. She bombarded Adrian with a hailstorm of frantic, hysterical calls and texts. "What is going on, Adrian? Some lawyer sent me an eviction notice from my apartment. Your wife is insane. You need to fix this now." Adrian, humiliated and increasingly desperate, tried to placate her with hollow promises, but the currency of his power had been devalued. He no longer held the keys to that kingdom. Chloe's dream of a life of effortless luxury turned into a nightmare of packing boxes. The designer clothes, the opulent furnishings, the illusion of a secure future, it all began to crumble. She had hitched her star to a falling man. When it became painfully clear, Adrian couldn't, or more accurately was forbidden by his father to buy her another comparable sanctuary. Especially with his finances under sudden intense scrutiny, Chloe's mercenary colors showed in their full garish glory. Her tearful demands morphed into bitter accusations and threats to go to the press with her own sordid story. A move that only further weakened Adrian's already untenable position. The battle over the penthouse became the unmovable linchpin of the divorce settlement. Adrian, under immense pressure from his father to make the scandal disappear quickly and quietly, and faced with Victoria Chen's unwavering resolve, was forced to capitulate completely. The final meeting was a portrait of defeat. In exchange for Isabella agreeing to a discreet divorce and a cast-iron non-disclosure agreement, the penthouse via the trust remained unequivocally hers. Furthermore, a generous child support agreement that would ensure her child wanted for nothing, and a significant portion of their other, more legitimately shared marital assets were settled in Isabella's favor, free and clear. Adrian was left seething, his reputation in tatters, his finances significantly dented, and his ego shattered into 1,000,000 pieces. The Thorne empire, while Vast was shaken, and whispers followed Adrian like a shadow in the halls of finance and society. His Midas touch seemed to have tarnished, and Adrian Thorne, pragmatic to the core, began to subtly sideline his son from key decision-making roles, a quiet corporate coup that installed Adrian's more stable younger sister as the heir apparent. For Isabella, the months following the confrontation were a period of profound quiet transformation. The ambient stress of the situation had been immense, but it was overshadowed by a deep, grounding sense of her own power. She moved out of the Central Park duplex, a place that now felt like a beautiful mausoleum, leaving the ghosts of her marriage behind without a second glance. After careful consideration, she decided against moving into the Hudson Yards penthouse herself. It was a spoil of war, a symbol of her victory, but it was also tainted by betrayal. Instead, Victoria Chen's office helped her lease it out to a hedge fund manager at a premium, the substantial rental income flowing directly and untouchably into the trust, securing a steady financial future for her and her child. With a portion of her settlement, she bought a beautiful, light-filled brownstone in a quieter, family-friendly neighborhood in Brooklyn, a space that felt like a true home, a sanctuary she had chosen, fought for, and secured herself. She focused on her health, her baby, and the joyful rediscovery of her own passions. The gentle art curator hadn't disappeared. She had simply integrated with the shrewd strategist who now coexisted within her. She began consulting for private collectors and boutique galleries, working on her own terms. Her professional reputation now enhanced by a newfound respect for her quiet strength and razor-sharp intelligence. A few weeks before her due date, as she was overseeing the final touches on the nursery in her new brownstone, a small, anonymously sent package arrived. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, was a single, perfect, pale, yellow knitted bootie, a match to the one she had been holding when her world had first started to unravel. There was no note, but Isabella had a strong suspicion it was from Martin Poole. A quiet gesture of, what apology, admiration, a secret acknowledgement of her victory. She'd never know for sure, but it felt like a small symbolic closing of a painful chapter. When her daughter Olivia Grace Thorne was born, Isabella felt a love so fierce, so profound, it eclipsed all the pain she had endured. Holding Olivia in her arms in the quiet peace of her Brooklyn home, she knew every difficult decision, every sleepless night, every moment of gut-wrenching fear and steel-spined resolve had been worth it. Adrian made a cursory, awkward visit to the hospital. The encounter was strained polite on the surface, but humming with the undercurrent of irreparable damage. He looked diminished, his signature arrogance replaced by a weary resignation. He was a father, yes, but he was no longer her partner, no longer the architect of her world. He was just a man who had made a catastrophic miscalculation. Isabella Rossi Thorne had not just survived. She had triumphed. She had faced the ultimate betrayal and emerged not bitter, but stronger, wiser, and in complete control of her own destiny and that of her child. The glittering penthouse on Hudson Yards still stood as a silent monument on the Manhattan skyline, but it was no longer a symbol of infidelity. It was a testament to a pregnant wife's incredible courage and her resolute refusal to be a victim. She had rewritten her story, and the best chapters were still to come. Her rebirth was complete, forged in the crucible of a millionaire's drama, and she was finally and gloriously free. And so Isabella turned the tables, transforming a symbol of betrayal into a fortress of security for herself and her child. A tale of high-stakes revenge, legal cunning, and the unbreakable strength of a mother. What did you think of Isabella's bold move? Could you have done it? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you were gripped by this story of drama strategy and ultimate triumph, don't forget to hit that like button. Share this video with someone who loves a story of justice served cold, and most importantly, subscribe for more incredible tales of fortunes, won lost and dramatically reclaimed. Click that notification bell so you don't miss the next story. You won't believe what happens.